And here, not far from the square, are some more fortifications that we'll visit since we're here. It's typical, but when you get a little ways away from the main tourist areas, the level of decrepitation increases dramatically. Now here's the irony. This street has been completely redone not too long ago. As probably part of this entire project to restore the ancient gate. And here, this building being restored. This is a view on the inside area. So it will be an outstanding resource. That's probably going to be the tower top. That's where I was a little bit earlier, near St. Nicholas's Church. But here, again, you can see this old wall is coming up against the new one, or the remains of the old one, which has been restored at some time recently in the past. But if you think about that and that convent's restoration as being basic fundamental tourist infrastructure, then everything's moving along at a pretty brisk pace. And buildings like the one we saw called the General are just resources that someone will scoop up, or the city will make the owner restore it in order to make it fit into the expensive infrastructure that the city has invested in, or the country has invested in. Notice again these very defined plateau-like angles. Someday all these buildings will be freshly painted, perhaps. This building fully restored to its original glory. All to the benefit of these folks. It will require that the other infrastructure, the transportation getting here, become upgraded. But that's just a question of either buying new trains or shifting some of the good-looking ones, instead of the old decrepit ones, to this line. There's the market, great market down there, and you can see the stairway going up into the town hall. It's interesting how similar this looks to the Roman Colosseum, including the brickwork that was hidden under some of the stucco. Again, notice the decrepitness of this inner courtyard of this building. I think the ground floors have been abandoned. Here, an older building restored to the current police station, which I saw last night from the outside, and it's very modern on the inside. These are the wood dormers on this building we saw from the wall, but notice they're wood and how nicely they've been restored. This is a very nice cafe. And there's a whole bunch of competition here, and their menu is not in English. They don't have an English menu, and they don't have English subtitles. Other restaurants do. How unsophisticated can you be? Or how arrogant can you be when you own a tourist restaurant on a tourist square in a tourist town, and you don't put your menu in English, which is what most people in the world who travel here who don't speak Polish can speak. You can call it naive. Me, I call it arrogant stupidity. Another view of the square, perhaps enhanced by the spectacular clouds in the background. Tourist season really begins in June, so there are many people here, but not as many as there would be in the summer, where you have busloads of people. Haven't seen a Japanese person yet. My guess is that these are local folks, Polish people who are taking a little vacation here, and maybe a few other in the couples or solo people taking trips. Not much happening this afternoon, but it's a lovely afternoon after a very foggy and then cloudy morning. Beginning of tourist season, these devices that you see around that look curiously inverted cones are for the flowers, and this morning they're putting them in. So this heralds the near beginning of the tourist season. Nice old industrial or commercial brick building. Down this straight road is the Rotunda, and here on the left and on the right you can see some current excavations going on. And if you recall the model that I videoed, there was a long salient road. I'm going to pan around here quickly, so hold on to your chair. That went back, that came directly from the wall straight out to the Rotunda. Now, a few minutes ago on that corner, just as a side point, I happened to ask a young man for directions to the Rotunda, and he quickly picked up on the fact that I spoke English. I'm going to turn the camera. Once he pointed it out, he said, "Where are you from?" or something like that, and I said, "America." And he said, "Oh, I speak a little English." And he said, "I am going to practice now," and he is practicing to become a veterinarian, a very sharp young man. He said, "You are the first American I have met." Didn't say it quite like that, but well enough for me to understand. And we were both pleased with that. The road we're walking down was a causeway that went to the Rotunda, which is where the Polish stored their ammunition, presumably on the prudent concept that if that by mistake should blow up, you blow up your fort. I assume that when danger struck, they moved everything in or had a way of keeping it extremely defended. Now, if I look off to the right here, you can see what looks like a swampy or creek area. It's a wet area for sure. And the same thing is true on the left. So my guess is that this probably was moated all the way out to here and quite well defended, which is probably some of the excavation we just looked at a moment ago. All along the sides of this embankment now, on this side at least, and I'll check this other side in a moment, are graves commemorating either individuals or groups of individuals who were slaughtered probably by the Nazi and maybe by the communists. We'll walk down this side. The other one showed crosses, meaning the Christians or Catholics of Poles. Here we've seen the Jewish for sure, and then I'm not sure what these red stars stand for here. It may be military personnel. But few countries have to have memorials like this everywhere, and plaques everywhere, and statues everywhere, memorializing those who were slaughtered, there's no nice word to use, by the German Nazis. Here's a special monument we'll take a look at. Of course, I have no idea what this is, but he lived from 1899 to 1942, so it's pretty obvious it dealt with the Second World War. Again, I don't know what the red star means, but my guess is that it's military. The graves arrayed in a semicircle around this statue perhaps point to the leader who may be buried underneath this monument. When I say military, what I mean is the AK, which was the partisan or home army against the Nazis, the insurgents in other words. As historians or people who've been acquainted with some history here, we bandy about the number 6 million Jews here, 3 million something or others there, 11 something or other Jews and assorted other peoples. We bandy that about because we have no other way of conceptualizing or summing up the atrocities of this place. But as you walk along this path, you recognize that it's a little bit more personal here. For example, on these long rectangular plots, is this one person or one group of men or women in a certain underground cell? I don't know. And I don't mean to be negative, but even in the younger generation, whoever it is that mowed this little patch of lawn, the grass strewn across that headstone, for lack of a better word, to one who was empathizing, that would have been immediately swept off with a small broom. The younger generations, I'm afraid, do not have any better way of empathizing than perhaps I do. Although the unconscious awareness of what happened here, its effects at least, stemming or flowing from their parents' upbringing and the way their parents acted about certain things is probably embedded in them. I think it may account for the way they treat people who are not close friends. Okay, now we're getting a little bit of a look at the rotunda. Now we're looking back down the causeway. You can see that it was placed at a considerable distance. You wonder why this great a distance was necessary from a military viewpoint. I'll now go inside and get our view from there. This is now known as the Museum of Martyrdom of Zamość region. Now you'll notice that while it was a repository for the gunpowder and so forth, it was also designed to be defensive. These slots here, while not, I don't think, no, I'm wrong, yes, these are the classic narrowing slots, are designed for returning fire, and those steps leading to parapets at the top probably. So this was built in 1825, and the interior yard is 38.5 meters in diameter. The exterior walls are 2.26 meters thick and 9.4 meters high. I don't know what these were for, perhaps to fill with some kind of fluid to be flamed. That insignia, which I keep thinking is Teutonic Knight, and it may be, but that, whatever it stands for, I'm sure it's extremely Polish, whatever it is. So apparently we're able to go in here and look about. Some of these slots are not gun slots, but rather air infiltration slots, or ventilation. The camera can't pick this up, but down there about 3 feet, the wall or the hole turns to the left and angles off, and the air flows through here. You can see some light. It's interesting that in this first room, where there's explanation in Polish, of course, no English, the symbol on top of this plaque appears to be a reference to Christ's thorn crown. Probably among the Christian and Jewish world, a universal symbol of martyrdom. And we'll continue on in. Now we get explanations in English. Let me read this as I try to show these pictures, or photographs at the same time reading. This was a quote by someone, probably one of the American military. During my first visit to the Rotunda on the day 26th of the 7th month of 1944, the day following the retreat of the Germans, I noticed a large amount of calcium chloride on cell number 2. Cell number 1 contained barrels of tar. Split firewood was laid up along the wall on the left side of the entrance to the courtyard, approximately 20 cubic meters. I noticed charred logs along the walls of the courtyard. Parts of the iron fencing made of angle bars were located on the right-hand side of the courtyard, which probably served as a grate for the burning of bodies. Cell number 13 housed a woodworking shop as well as anvil and 4 pairs of shackles locked using rivets. The door granting in cell number 3 contained a grappling hook on which I discovered human hair. All other cells had their floors partially covered by straw mattresses and a thin layer of old dirty straw. Among other things, a tool for pulling off fingernails was found in Rotunda. Outside the Rotunda on that very same day, I found freshly moved earth with the remains of murdered victims here and there. To the left, near the Rotunda, I saw the corpse of a man aged about 40 lying on his back. The body was quite fresh, lying on the surface of the earth, covered only by branches. His arms, legs, and chest were burned. His skin was a dark brown from fire. His fingernails had been ripped off. I guess we get the point. Kind of. Never totally. Not like the people he described, and not like those who even found them, nor like those who were the relatives of them. The eyewitness told me that they saw Count Alexander, over 70 years old, the owner of Labuni near Zamość, ordered to run around the courtyard. He did the first lap with great difficulty. They ordered him to go into a cell, take off his jacket, leave all his things, and continue the run. The old man entered the courtyard again. He tried to run, but after a few meters he fell dead on the ground. This is not execution. This is entertainment. This is evil. So apparently this Nazi installation was never referred to formally as a place of interrogation, execution, extermination. It was also used during a particular Nazi plan to exterminate the intelligentsia of Poland. This merely points out that the goal of the German Nazis was to eliminate the people from a country they conquered and move Germans in and resettle it into not only German, but productively German. Fortunately, these are only snapshots. Imagine if we could hear the sound, watch what went on day after day in some kind of restorable video. If we could listen to these people, if they happen to be the friends or the family of those victims slaughtered. Will that young boy who gazes at his parents, and they are his parents according to the picture, will he somehow be able to shield that from his brain? The man I had the pleasure of spending time with this last weekend, he cannot. Here are two heroes, a man and his woman, his wife, who were able, through their efforts, to save over 400 children under 6 years of age. Now, if you were to come upon this village at this date, you would see this picture of these 19 men, 17 women, and 15 children shot to death, their belongings plundered by the Gestapo. And here, Polish children rescued from a camp. Hard to look at them, realize that they have a life ahead of them, hopefully. Although a terrible one, unknowns to them with the communists, reasonably terrible, not this terrible. This was a resettlement camp. In other words, we're moving you out of wherever you've lived, and we're putting you in a place until we decide how to kill you. This one was first set up for Soviet war prisoners. Don't know what the sign says, but the chains are ominous, to say the least. And there's a scrap of barbed wire. We've all read enough books, seen enough movies to try to imagine the sounds of horror that would have issued from this building, and the glee and the pleasure that the German Nazis gained from that pleasure. It was not just execution. It was not just scientific. A visit by Heinrich Himmler. The irony is, for the brilliant Germans, they were so aggressive in their extermination policy, they ran short of labor, and that accelerated an inflationary economy, a black market and so forth, that they were unable to resolve or control. Certainly I cannot read the text of this old newspaper from that time, but I'm sure you can imagine what the dark spots are in the photograph. When I entered the room, a bird flew out of her nest, a quaint reminder that life in some form goes on. There she is, wondering what I'm doing. And there are some new young Poles. Here, a photograph of the Polish soldiers who died in September 39. If you remember the building that had the two statues in it, one on the right of Hercules and the one on the left of Minerva, then you'll recognize the point in the square that we're looking at. This is what the square looked like, with anti-aircraft ditches built into it. A humorous German postcard that the soldiers could send home. I can't read it, but it suggests that some people were living a very good life, whether that's a German soldier being pulled about by the pole or a German officer. In the background you see the city hall of Zamość. These are what look like high school students who are sewing anti-gas pads in 1939. Imagine what they thought on that day was really happening around them. Imagine what their thoughts were 5 years later, looking back. And then imagine what their thoughts are now for those who may still be alive. I don't know what this monument is inside. It looks like it's heavily weathered and perhaps was moved here. But the walls have memorial wreaths that folks have left, including a relatively new sign there. Whatever it is, it's important, so I take off my hat here, although I should take it off elsewhere. Perhaps in Poland I should never wear a hat. Because like the battlefield of Gettysburg, there's very few places that don't have blood. Each room now seems to be dedicated to a monument of some person or group of people. I think this is the name of one of the extermination camps, but I'm not sure. And maybe each room is a memorial to those who died in a particular camp. But there are very specific ones here too. There's a picture of a young boy, kind of picture that you'd have taken in a photo booth. I think of my life that's been basically devoid of anything to be frightened of. For a 3-day period, I had a gnawing fear of communism after a discussion of the buildup of arms that we had in the South Pacific Island in anticipation of something we might have to do. 9/11 was America's first experience with the horror of unbridled slaughter. And yet we still have mobs of insane fool citizens who believe we should be pacifists. God, they should come here. You can see we've walked around most of the inside. My fundamental philosophy and belief on man is that man is evil. He is not good with a bit of dirt on him that needs to be cleaned off. He is not part of some great goodness, as the Eastern philosophies might have. Because of man's high intelligence, he is able to place a value on something that is not inherently in that something. For example, an animal may kill another animal because it's hungry. It eats the other animal. It's satisfied with that, with the exception of weasels in a killing frenzy. That's how most life works. Man, on the other hand, kills one deer, has the opportunity to take another deer that he doesn't need from someone else because he's stronger. He may well do it. That's the value that man has placed on that is not inherent in that second deer. It doesn't necessarily have any value, except it springs from man's ability to place a value on it that doesn't really exist in it. That's where the evil comes, in the form of selfishness and greed. Attach all of the political or religious trappings that you like to war and conquest. It all comes down to economics. The Germans wanted more land. The first thing they wanted was a strip across Poland to connect the two pieces of land they did control. That's fairly logical, actually. Everything else sprang from it. That's what I call evil. So this is what that retrenchment that we looked at with the two men working on it looks like from up on top. Again, putting soil on top serves a lot of benefits. Better insulation, and probably it contains bombardment impacts better. You wonder what all these little marks are for. Are they just random doodlings by soldiers posted here, or something else? As did and do the iconic archways of Auschwitz symbolize the horror of Germany. Perhaps these wooden doors, certainly this archway or this entryway did, for those who were brought here after 1939. Are these the original wooden doors? I would think so. The barbed wire at top. For how many did this auxiliary door and the view outside it represent the last view they would ever have of their beloved Poland? Okay, this section along the left side, as you leave of the road, is a cemetery for Polish soldiers killed in September 39, and to the soldiers of the Armia Krajowa, in other words, the Home Army. On the right side, the side that we walked down earlier, are the graves of Soviet soldiers, Jews, and a single grave of 20 people murdered by Polish secret police in Jasina near Zamość. This is also a good time to be reminded that the oppressors represented here are not only the German Nazis and not only the Russian communists, but the Soviet Union before the Second World War. Because they also inflicted their atrocities on Poland. Of course, this does not include any of the atrocities, massive Hitler-like atrocities, very much Hitler-like atrocities, perpetrated by the Swedes a century or so before. Here, some graves have nameplates, some do not. And there on the walls are more memorials, individual blocks of stone attached. It appears to be of individuals. And scratched into this soft white stone are other names and dates. And here one scratch, something scratched out. Could that have been some Nazi graffiti removed? But yet, notice the date there, 1997. a year before, or is that 27? Could be 27. Someone actually remembers, and still another. As I walk along here, I was thinking of the cemeteries that I've been in and the grave sites I've been at. Here, the Great American Cemetery in Normandy, also the German cemetery at Normandy. And then I've thought of a small grave site of Hembry, a boy killed when he reached in and pulled out the wrong end of a shotgun from a Oregon Trail pioneer wagon, and it killed him. He's buried in Wyoming alongside the Oregon Trail. The small cemeteries that I've seen now abandoned because the community is no longer there. Just dates of people who lived and died without perhaps any particular traumatic experience. These 3 graves, well maintained, fresh flowers planted. You were remembered. What a horrible price you had to pay to breathe the first breath of air. When I think of the surly, sometimes dramatically rude attitude of some of the Poles that I've encountered, I say some because I've also met some that were just excellent, wonderful people, particularly to me. Well, of course, that's my reaction. I realize that as I leave this place of hallowed ground, I think a bit about the people, the Poles I've met, who are very surly, some grossly rude, and I just wonder how much of this horror in the last 100 years, not to mention the last 200 or 300 years, accounts for some of that. Some polls that I've asked suggest that it's the result of low pay and no sense of opportunity. And for others, it may be a wish that they were better off under communism with just a tiny bit, always struggling and scraping for that, than to be in this free enterprise state of worry. I don't know. Just by way of a diary note, the rudeness that I'm talking about that's so palpable and endemic is, for example, if I walk into a restaurant cafe here on this square, which is a tourist town, there may be 4 waiters and waitresses standing there. They will stare at me with this absolutely blank look. I mean, I wouldn't call it hatred. I would just call it, at the very least, completely devoid of any kind of friendly emotion. And they're the people that are going to serve me. They're the people I'm going to pay money to. Once you do something, you smile, you say something to them or whatever, then they will probably react. And then it will become perhaps nice. But the reticence to show any kind of emotion, friendly emotion, to someone they don't know, even when it's their business, is very real and very almost consistent. Not totally, almost consistent. Here, water flowing through what probably was a channel that's been used for at least since the 16th century. to channel water into the moat area. So this was the first wall I looked at, or first gate I looked at yesterday morning. And I'm now just going to traipse my way to the right, go counterclockwise, and just follow the wall as close as I can. Now, panning from the wall, you'll notice that this is a newly completed, I think, newly completed parking lot. And that building there, which looks old, I don't know what its purpose is, I haven't heard anything about it, is certainly in the state of being restored also. This will probably become part of some kind of a complex. Remember, if there are like 7 of these compounds, if you will, gates, entry places this size, or of the even bigger ones we saw yesterday afternoon, imagine each of those as a center for some kind of tourist function. You could bring many, many more busloads of people here. And if you get your train system developed right, you could bring trainloads of people here. Okay, I'm going to start on this little path, which is, I think, the closest thing I can get to that defensive wall. I've stopped by this sewer because it reminds me of the sewers that the people in Warsaw used in the Nazi uprising, and I wonder if it played any kind of a role here. I'm just curious about the remnants that I find. These, they look like a fencing, but they're not. They're irregular. The little holes, I don't know what those would be for. Okay, as I come around the corner, I see the area I was at of the wall yesterday afternoon at the end of the day. There you can see the new version of the wall at St. Nicholas Church there. And this is where that Roman-like archway stair was. And there the St. Clair Church and Convent that's being restored. But now I notice some digging here, and that means excavation. I want to go see what that is. Now it's of course fenced off, but the fence is broken down long ago because we do it once and then don't care, of course. Okay, we're rewarded by a more intimate view of the original foundation. As you can see, the archaeologists have moved it away. What it looks like is that there was either some fill material down there, then a couple of layers of bricks were placed as a footing on top of that footing, and then the wall itself composed of brick with a facing of that white stone. I want to get down in and see what's in that hole that they've excavated out. So we'll scoot down through here. Okay, what the archaeologists have done is discovered a arch. You can see the remnant of it there. It had been filled in at a later date, and then chopped it all out to see what was originally behind that arch. So let's go see. Hopefully wild dogs won't come flying out. Okay, I can't see very deep into that, but what we have is a room within an arch. There's a doorway back there. I don't know if you can see it, but a doorway there. So here some kind of underground facility existed. And a closer look at the wall structure, although that may be affected by the process of filling it in. Now notice, even as I walk along here, it's pretty clear that there is a very specific level plateau above the elevation I'm at, and that these were probably nicely smoothed out walls at one time. Okay, just some more detail. There's the closed-in archway that I was looking at from below earlier. There's an air infiltration hole or something there, and 3 holes over there. Whether those holes were used to hold supports of some sort or what, I don't know. In theory, from where I'm standing here, if I turn off the camera and rotate 180 degrees, ahead of me is where that wall should tie in, if in fact that's where it went. And if it did, then that meant that that port down there, that arch, was an external entryway, an outside door. If not, then it was interior. So this is the road leading to that arch doorway. Whether how much of it is original, maybe this first part that I'm standing on, at least the pathway, if not the stones. And notice that there, it looks like the original wall had fallen off or was knocked away to put a protective top on that section of the wall. Well, let's go see what the inside of these things look like. There it rises up a little ways for some curious reason. I'm sure those stairs are all new. Maybe even these walls are new, or newer. So I think I shot this view yesterday, but just to tie it all together. Now I'll walk up there and try to continue further. Here again, another sewer. You can see, if you know the routes of the sewers, you could get around undetected. The little park I was in yesterday at that third of the original market squares. Here next to the remodeled church and convent is a very pretty inner courtyard of some buildings, which hopefully represent what all of these buildings eventually will look like. You've seen me poke into the worst, or some of the worst that I could see. But here's one with a bench that I'm sitting on, a rare thing, with hedges and grass and pretty trees. I think it is this vision that those who are optimists in Poland, who don't have that resignation philosophy, aspire to. This is what they imagine. And hopefully this is what they will attain. I suspect that EU funds are being dumped into this country at a fairly pronounced amount. It's one of the poorest nations. It is the poorest nation of the EU, but also may have some of the greatest potential for its here, more of the wall being worked on. I can't see it. I'm going to try and get over where that railroad is, and then I can see it in my anal quest to see it all. So I just cut through that building from that courtyard, and here I am where I was yesterday, near St. Nicholas, looking at the project so far. Now, just like signs similar to this are used to describe where the railroad is, this may just say gate or fence. Okay, to orientate, there's St. Nicholas Church, and here's some more of the wall excavation. That looks like it's curved, like it's a curving of some sort. Now just let me rotate the camera here. There's the Franciscan church, and then right to the right is the new gate building. So about 180 degrees, I'm standing right on the line. And that's where I was standing a few minutes ago, looking down into that part of the excavation which runs from left to right. And that was the line from left to right. It was between the new gate and the portion of the wall near St. Nicholas. So now we're looking at something, a wall that comes out perpendicular from that. And here a man has been working on digging out that archway down there. And you can see still another there, and it looks like a complete circle. It's not an arch. Maybe it's an arched doorway, perhaps two of them. And then here a spout for getting water off, and here the wall continues. But you notice that now it starts to curve out at this point. So perhaps where we are is some other kind of a building structure here. Now you may not be able to notice it, but that right side of that archway, as it goes back in, it angles to the left. So this is going in at an angle like that. It's not going straight into that wall. Now another historical footnote that I'm adding, whether it's true or not, this train is coming from the direction of the Rotunda, and it was said that one of the benefits of the Rotunda was that you could move goods from the Rotunda by rail. Goods, and they also made a reference to the people who were being sent to various extermination camps. So it may well be that this has a very horrible history, but it apparently is currently used. Again, here is some kind of a marker, L453, whether it's a railroad marker or not. Okay, now I'm on the railroad tracks opposite all of that I was looking at. There's that gap between the newly built wall and the old one. And St. Nicholas is to my right as I pan. There is St. Clair Church and Cathedral there. Notice here the beautiful curved restoration of that wall that's closest to us. And again, you can imagine how all of this area in front here, it'd be my guess, will be converted into some kind of a tourist center at some point in time. Here you can see remnant of the wall. What this area up here was, I don't know. These look like manholes, but I don't know. There's a chunk of wall, which is probably giving the archaeologists, like a geologist, a clue about elevation and location. In fact, here you can see the wall, the old wall capped, and through there a pile of rubble marking where the wall used to go. Now, I don't know if it went through this churchyard or not. Looks like it may well be angling over there. If that's the case, they'll do something. This excavation kind of answers that question. You can see there's the bus stop I was standing behind over there. You see it when I was shooting some of that in this direction here, and you can see that apparently the wall runs right underneath the churchyard here somewhere. So that'll be interesting to see how they deal with that one. Some more wall excavation. This looks like a buttress here, and those just may be foundational walls. But clearly going underneath the church, as you can see. I mean, not underneath the church, but the church property. There you can see the structure. This was a massive accomplishment. So panning around, I can connect the excavation over there that's been completed, the restoration, and the area in between it, that dirt you see in behind those trees, through here, through the church property, down through this area here, and over to where I was videoing it before, plus this area here that goes over to the side. Now, right where that fellow's standing there are where those two arches were that I saw a man digging out. So again, panning down through this ditch, notice how the plastic's protecting this wall, since they don't have to do anything with it right now. Here we've got some kind of a structure. I'm standing above where those two doorways were, and there's the new gate over there, so the wall will extend right in that direction. Okay, just to connect the dots, that face, which is the entry to New Gate, to the left of the steeple for the St. Nicholas Church, is on a line with that excavation I was just looking at, and then right to my right is the old gate, and then here is that huge complex called the retrenchment that I was at yesterday. So now we'll walk to the right around. Just occurred to me that those two gentlemen working on that small section down there have great job security, at least for the next several years. Here you can get an idea of what the rest of this will look like that these men are working on. My guess is that this man is cleaning it off with some kind of wet device. I think it's wet. Maybe in preparation of putting a sealant on top. That man washing down the brick that they've just cleaned off, the old brick. Probably getting preparation of putting that layer of cement on, which probably ties the wall together as well as provides a protective barrier, and then they put the final roof on. Now, after they get done with the restoration, imagine how all of this land can be turned into a more beautiful park area, not only for the citizens but for the tourists that they will undoubtedly draw to this area. This is the back of that first building, big building complex that I'd focused on. Just to the left, or to the right from our view, of the area we've just looked at. Okay, swinging further right, this is that first big building that I had looked at after I visited the Franciscan church. First Franciscan church. Here we can get another sense of the depth of that trench, if you will, surrounding this entire wall. I'm only about maybe a third down in elevation. Okay, I'm now behind the building, and this whole area has been turned into a running track, which I'm standing on the starting area, and a soccer field. I'll pan around and then we'll take a closer look. Now, some of those holes get smaller as they go inward, which would suggest they were for gun emplacements. Whether they were or not, I don't know. Notice there were other holes there, probably for firing smaller arms, that have now been filled in. I'm sure this building is being productively used. This is the entrance of some sort. Whether it went deeper than that. Where those roof drainage ports are, I'm guessing that originally this was a sod roof that had some depth beneath the height that we see now of dirt, and then this was for it to water to channel out. Here we're looking at the back of the part we looked at yesterday in its state of restoration. I'd taken a closer look from over on that side before of that bridge there, how long that's existed, whether it's original or not, not a clue. But again, you can notice these earth embankments stretching away from us in various design. There's another angling one up that way. Here and get some perspective. I think all of this carpeting and foam is some kind of an informal bicycle playground. Somehow the carpeting aids that, probably creating a little bit more consistent surface than just dirt. Another example of their creativity. Little jump. And now we're getting down into these trenches a bit. Have no clue, of course, what the structure is or was. My guess is that that arch there would have been a drainage arch to allow water to pass through. Closer look at this bridge, however it was used. The purpose of this statue of King David is to commemorate the presence of Jews here in Zamość since the time of Jan Zamość, who invited them and the Armenians here to live. To connect the dots, from this point we passed that church that I looked at that seemed to be so plain and somewhat decrepit, if I remember correctly, and the ground's not well kept up, although the church was painted nicely on the outside. And there the park, and I had left the park today, so we'll now walk over there since the wall would have continued over to that area. Before I go into the park, I just wanted to come and sit in this pretty little copse of trees with some beautiful flowers. And I can see that there appears to be another pretty little spot down there a ways. When you walk around Poland cities, it's very easy to ridicule and wonder about the shabbiness of many of the areas and many of the things, and the failure to upgrade, like failure to clean this up right here. But to be fair, you have to think that 19 years ago, under communist rule, there probably wasn't a concern for flowers. There wasn't this at all. There might not have been these benches here. It was a very basic, simple, ascetic, frugal life. It wasn't even as bad as we think it might have been in talking to the people. It was just very basic. Of course, it was oppressive, but once you got past that, if you went about your daily life, it was just grinding. But it wasn't necessarily horrifying unless you were doing something horrifying. And then you might expect to get caught and have some very nasty things happen to you. So to me, spots like this are pinpoints, laser beams, if you will, into the future. Once you've done this and the economy improves and that wall is finished, and the whole economy will hopefully increase and everything will get better and better and better. I've stopped in this restored building here. It's a little tiny restaurant. You can get pizza and probably other simple menu things, some basic things to drink, and then sit at these benches and enjoy this quiet little park-like setting, which I thought I would do before I go into the park. One thing I notice about Poland, at least in the outskirts areas, is that there's a tendency to still do everything by hand. Labor is dirt cheap. Those men, of course, working on that retrenchment and the wall, those skills are specific, and there's probably no way to mass do those with great efficiency, and they are using pneumatic chisels and drills and things like that. And of course, a hedge trimmer is a one-man job, and he's using the machine you should use. But to do the lawn, they might well do this lawn with a couple of guys in weed trimmers. That's how they did all of that retrenchment area that I was in, like that deep area over there when I was walking and the grass had been cut. Not cut there, but it had all been done with weed eaters. Going by a salon yesterday, maybe 4 or 5 women sitting outside, nobody doing anything. Restaurants may have 3, 4 waiters, waitresses all day long, and very few customers there. So there's an intent to provide a lot of work for everybody, but very low wages. We're standing at the entrance to the park, made to look tourist pretty with a quick white paint job. Here across this bridge, pretty view of flower displays. But before going any deeper, I'm going to go down along this walkway and take a closer look at the restoration of the wall in this part. Okay, here is another gate area, I think. And there's another one of those little buildings off to the side, to the right there. Certainly a defensive building if you look at those windows that slope inward. I don't know what its function was. Here we can see that several things. One, the wall to the left, roughly of the center of your picture, has been fully restored vertically, and the part to the right they're still working on. This huge pile of rubble representing what's been taken off the sides is impressive. And you can see on the top portion they're working on that, and they've gotten to that stage of the cement layer. Here a very beautiful, I guess you'd call it arch entryway, although it's been covered in, filled in. Whether it was ever used as an entry, I don't know. And then to the left they have actually completed, almost completed that, the brickwork's completed, it looks like, and they're now working on the grassy area on top. And on that note, let's take a closer look at the grass area up on top. This will give us an idea of how that's been done. Looks pretty thick. How much of it is just an accumulation over 40 years, I don't know, but take a closer look at that stucco work. Probably the Virgin Mary holding what I think is the iconic symbol of Poland. I'm getting that feeling now, not just the Teutonic Knights, if in fact the Teutonic Knights. It looks like it says yeah, this lower portion looks like it says Joan of Zamość. Interesting. Here they've redone the new wall up to the old wall, and they'll tie it in as they have on that portion there. There you can see the work going on around the archway, which is the most difficult and precise work, I would guess. Here's some more structure. And notice the water down there, as though there's a water table. And would that have been a port to allow water to flow through? Because looking back up here to my right, you'll see that we're in a waterway, so it's quite possible that this was kept well filled with water. These look like cannon-size firing ports. Now these firing ports, and there are many of them here, giving a real range of fire. In other words, angle of fire. Maybe they were the first line of defense for the wall itself. And notice that the archwork here is a relief that gets successively shallower as you go from the center to the outside. Just happened to notice that. Here we can get a sense of how deeply they have to dig in to that wall, probably the same way a dentist does, searching for weak, decayed, diseased substance and getting it out so that when they restore it, it will be of the higher quality. That looks pretty rough and jumbled in there, though. They've already started on those lower courses. I wonder if they fill in behind with cement. Pretty view of the Parks Lake, which was a defensive lake for this town. You can hear a lot of frogs out there. A few of them out there chasing each other. It looks like this walkway is used as a running path also. It could be there's not a lot of oxygen down below, I don't know. Although I think they're mammals, air breathing, not mammals. I'm going to walk back up and go across the bridge to the flowered area and back down to the lake the way most people would do it, just for that experience. Okay, that building then is called a kojec, K-O-J-E-C, at the 5-sided defensive building. Okay, so I'm entering right about in here, I think, and I should be standing right about there. And I walked first down here past the kojec down to the lake, and I'm back up here. I'm going to go into here and wander around back down to the lake. Broad walkways, lots of benches under these shady trees. Beautiful place to come and spend time. Hopefully the Nazis did the same thing, and that's why it's still preserved. Okay, if you remember from that video I took in the museum of the model, you can see that I'm standing on one of the points of those embankments that existed. It goes back to my right and back to my left. We're looking out into, I suspect, the real part of Zamość, which I never went to. Okay, here we're approaching the lake from a different viewpoint. Nice cool breeze in the shady of these trees. Great place for Zamościans to have a nice quiet lunch. I came around here to see the ducks that I was positive were making some of that noise, but I can't see any ducks. It's all being made by frogs. Maybe they're different kinds or different sized frogs or something. It's like some high school track and field event. It seemed kind of funny that they didn't mow the lawns here, but then you see all the beautiful flowers that are in amongst the grass, and I can understand why they're not doing it. That's one reason. And we'll go across this bridge and see what we can see. This is a pathway. These arrows are showing the direction you're supposed to travel in. Another idea of the steep slope of these protective embankments. I'm going to go up to the top now again. Continue to pursue the wall. Now notice, if you made it this far, you had to climb up to the top here, then climb back down a steep one, and then back up the wall. And my guess is that all these were planned out so that the cannon and the gun's fields of fire could be concentrated in these places where they had the best shot at the most bodies. So this was a tunnel that could give you access through the wall. So my guess is this field of valleys that you were forced into or induced into would concentrate bodies into fields of fire. Here another such tunnel. Down there is the last wall area, I think. And to the left is the area I've just come over, those ridges near the lake. So I'm guessing I go down this way, and I'm on that plateau area. You can see these men working down below. On that car's hood, I think it's some more excavation work. So all of this area This wooded area is being worked over by the weed eater. Whereas I would think if it were the United States, we would try to use a four-wheeler and a hedgehog type of brush cutter, followed up if necessary by weed eaters. Some pretty purple flowers. Now I recognize where I am. This is the little building that I visited yesterday after I'd gone to the arsenal, which is the building to the left here, and here the palace. And the town center is straight ahead of the camera, as is my hotel room. And so this morning I started about where the walking by 9, which is the cathedral, and ultimately down to 39. Then I went towards the 38 and followed the wall outline all the way around. There, number 33 I think, no 32 is St. Nicholas, and there's the big retrenchment, number 28. And there, where the track and soccer field was, next to that big building, and then the monument of King David there at the top, and then into the park, and then followed that all the way around, and now I am just to the left of the 12, having come from the lake, which is the blue area on the upper left. Now he will walk over to this other side after getting a little applause. Now he will blow to that direction, or one of the other directions. I wanted to take a look at these windows because they're absolutely brilliant. If you open them this way, they open like you'd expect them to. Okay, no big surprise. Let's take a look at some of that sophisticated hardware without knowing what it does for sure. This side here can open up also, I think, by individually opening these little levers here. They're normally not opened. You can see the hinges. Whoever makes these things, perhaps German, but they're super good quality. Notice that's double glaze insulated glass. Here's some of the hardware on the edge, because here's the trick part. You close it. Now go on up. Notice I've rotated now the handle 180 degrees. First 90 position, now 180. Now watch what happens. The whole thing opens up. And now you've got ventilation through here without anybody being able to get access. Back down to this position and open up like this. And just as smooth as, to coin a phrase, a Swiss watch. Thought I'd give a last morning insight into tourism here in this pretty little town. But here's an example. This tablecloth, which is a material, and it's been pressed, but where there was a rip in it, they just gently sew it, and it's still exposed. That's pretty much Poland in a nutshell. Here, for example, is an old sofa bed, I guess, so it would probably hold another 2 people maybe, but rather than replace it with something that's new and modern or in good condition, they just put an old blanket over it. And here, most often you'll see the toilet paper holder not used, or in this instance just used as a shelf to put other piece of toilet paper roll. And oftentimes the rolls of toilet paper don't have any ring inside. They're just a solid roll of paper. And there is no maid service, so I've been here 3 days and no one has been in here to empty the trash or do anything. They don't do anything, so that's one good reason why you don't tip. Otherwise, the benefits of this hotel is that it's right in the square, not a mile and a quarter from it, although there's another hotel, probably a little nicer, right next door. Supposedly comparable in price, but I think it's more expensive. And the toilet seats, the cheap plastic you find all over South America and places like this also. And it's installed such that it's designed that it won't stay up when you're urinating. And the shower is the old-fashioned kind of thing that has no control over high temperature, so you have a range of about 1/8 of an inch, if that much, in which to get it at a temperature that's not cold and not scalding. Meat in these places have had a degree, whatever that means. Not high school, but apparently at some level above that in what they call tourism or hotel operation. My guess is that this is a course just about as bad as what there is in the United States for education, in that they're teaching them the basics of the steak and nothing about the sizzle. In other words, how do you keep track of the book? How do you check the person in? How do you make sure that the rooms are supposedly clean or whatever? But when it comes to how do you treat the customer, what's your attitude towards service, that is probably devoid. And they're probably taught by people who spent a few months working in a hotel when they were a little bit younger and have finally gotten themselves ensconced in a safe teaching job somewhere.